We're going to start those gatherings. Wait, here. Pause it for a second. We're going to start as we often start most gatherings in Haitian cultures, which is with a song. So we start this way.
Okay, so chose this song by the artist Pitt Law, the Haitian artist, and the song is, lyrics are there, I translated it. It's 30 years old, right? It came out, I think, in 1993, 1994. But this is the lyrics, this is the song, and I think it really ties in so well to what's going on today.
Can you zoom in on the lyrics?
No, because I think that would disappear. Sorry.
Si pas même pays, c'est tout bagaille couché, même si on pas j'en saisit, c'est tellement moins carré, c'est ma bonne. Si manger non pas. I'm gonna say it. Si la vie sans amis, si Haïti, si tellement moins calé, si ma oublié. Si manger non pas, si manger là. Si les louches, oui. Si la vie sans amis, si Haïti, c'est parce qu'on est, c'est parce qu'on exploite, on sont pas prêts, on va le pour lui, c'est vrai, alors c'est l'ancien, c'est parce qu'on est, c'est parce qu'on exploite, son papa, on va lui, c'est l'alliance des siècles anciens, et puis après.
Okay, so we'll start this with an invocation. I'll read it. So if today I take a small boat to drown like a frog in the middle of the ocean, because I'm trying to cheat misery, if children don't grow up, if there's no more country left, if everything is twisted, and this twisted condition is normalized, if there's nothing behind the hill in front of me, if I learn to forget, if I eat out of the trash, if I use rags as sheets, if people hold out their plates in front of the UN offices, if our life has no future, if Haiti dies, it's because you gutted it, you burst its bladder, it's because you exploited it, you gouged out its eyes. You are parents from hell, and you hold Lucifer's banner. So from century to century, green eyes, white people have become greedier. It's because you gutted it. You burst its bladder. It's because you exploited it. You gouged out both its eyes. You're parents from hell, and you hold Lucifer's banner. From century to century, green eyes have become greener.
Associate Director for the Center for Latin American Studies. I thank you all for coming to what we expect will be an ongoing series this semester, next semester, and thereafter. It was a great opportunity when a very involved group of people got together to put the series together. As the Center for Latin American Studies, our job is really to hold the platform and make these things possible to the extent that we can, but it really is not possible that the people that will be speaking and other people who are actually in the audience as well. And let me just briefly introduce Haiti and Empire, which is today's first discussion. We hope that it's recording. We can't tell because of the monitor, but we hope that it's being recorded on Zoom, so eventually it will show up in the YouTube page for the Center for Latin American Studies. I want to call out Dr. Sheila Eddins, as well as Dr. Felix Germain, Darlène Dubuisson, Dr. Darlène Dubuisson, as well as Dr. Crystal Eddins. And I think a person who sparked this event into coming who is Thalia Clerveau. So without taking any more of your time, I'll just hand it over to the panel.
Thank you.
So my name is Thalia. I am moderating today's event. And I'm going to start with an opening question and then move on to questions I'm going to point at each of the panelists. And then from there, anybody can jump in if anyone else has anything to add. So my first question is, we're here today to discuss the crisis in Haiti. However, Haiti is not the only country grappling with crisis, as I'm sure we're all aware. In an age where technology enables us to witness firsthand the real human effects of imperialism, what do you perceive as our collective responsibility, both as individuals and as scholars, professors, not directly affected by the crisis, to people globally who are currently subject to the crisis?
I'll start there. Thank you so much for that question. And I'm going to say this honestly, is really considering, and we'll return to this at the end, but what it means to be in solidarity. And something I've been really grappling with here at Pitt and grappling with in terms of when and where people put on the hat of solidarity and when they take it off. And to say that for some of us, right, there is no taking off the hat. There is no way not to be implicated. And I guess one of the things I think is important is to maybe challenge this idea of proximity and difference. Challenge the idea that empire has nothing to do with you, or genocide, or war, or occupation has nothing to do with you as an individual, and really interrogate both the ways that suffering elsewhere constructs our lives here in real concrete ways. As the series moves on, we'll talk about this, we'll talk about it in Pittsburgh, but I want us to really think about that, this idea that solidarity means helping those others who are unfortunate, as opposed to really thinking about complicity, right? And that we should all have skin in the game as human beings on this earth. I don't know if you all want to add something.
Nice.
Yeah.
So far, so good.
Thank you, President. So my next question is for you. What is the history of colonialism in Haiti? And how can the neo-colonial process continue to influence Haiti's current socio-political and economic realities?
So the reality is like these are questions we prepared for. So I prepared for this question. And this kind of like, what is the imperial history in Haiti and its current state? So I'm going to speak at us a little bit in terms of the history part. And I think we all can kind of think about the contemporary part. Why should we care about this little island right there? Why does that matter? Why put the spotlight on Haiti, and what can Haiti teach us about empire? These are the things that when my colleague Crystal and I were talking, I think last semester, these are the things we're thinking. It's because for many reasons, Haiti is this important site for global history. Haiti is the earliest site of European imperialism in the Americas. And that I think people don't realize that, right? So it was inhabited by humans since 5000 BCE. It was the first initial site of battles between Spanish colonizers and the existing occupants, who actually are the ones who refer to the island as Haiti. That's an indigenous story. And so one of the things to kind of think with is this would also be, so soon after Christopher Columbus stumbled upon the island in 1492, this is after Barbados, he stops and they create the first outpost, and the first European settlement in the Americas is on an island that they would rename Española. I think this is important. A new book that's out by one of my colleagues, Marlene Doe, it's this intellectual history of the Haitian Revolution, talks about the first battles between indigenous peoples and the Americas happened on this island. And then, right, they went by many names, and this idea that everybody was Taino is also not the case. And this is the first place that Columbus would land and create an outpost, the first site of indigenous resistance, and the first outpost of imperialism. It would become also the first place of enslavement in the Americas. And it is the start, Haiti is the start of empire globally. And I think oftentimes, it's important for us to grapple with this. Haiti as the start of empire. And Haiti then is spelled differently. And Haiti would be the name that the enslaved would take on, recognizing the importance of this indigenous placement. There are many stories then about the Maroons and the indigenous coming together against Columbus in 1503. And the then queen, right, of that part of the island would be executed there. This is now in what is now the Dominican Republic, right? This statue is the Papa de los Indios. It is a commemoration to the indigenous peoples who fought against empire as it was in the making all the way back in 1503. So this becomes important. Another thing that's important that I don't think we've realized too is that, actually it's that paper here, is that there was a marriage between a Maroon fighter, right, and an indigenous, for lack of a better word, queen against Columbus. And there was this idea very early on of solidarity, and there was these practices of solidarity very early on. These were the first Maroon communities that would exist. So fast forward. Fast forward to when the Spanish crown would turn its attention to mainland US. And in that moment, what would happen is that it would change hands, right? But before we turn to this, the French Empire, who would take over what is Haiti, it's important to also recognize that by the mid-16th century here, in Haiti itself, you would have the decimation of these indigenous peoples. The estimation was 500 to 700,000 inhabitants were wiped out. When in 1501, the Spanish crown decreed that they would bring in enslaved Africans. In 1501, the first enslaved peoples would come to, or would be brought forcibly to España. As Haiti begins to wane in importance for the Spanish crown, the French seized an opportunity to enhance their empire. And in 1625, we have French buccaneers, right, on the nearby island of Tortuga, operating under Ferdinand d'Oran's leadership. And these things are not that important, like the names are not that important. But the French would cede that part of the island to the French. The Spanish would cede that part of the island to the French in 1697, and they would rename it Saint-Domingue. Haiti would make France the most profitable empire. Haiti, no bigger than the size of Massachusetts, would produce more coffee than anywhere in the world. It would produce more coffee than Brazil. It would be where enslavement and the kind of cruel unlogics of enslavement become codified into law. So France's profit then would come at a devastating cost. Remember, by the late 18th century, it was the world's largest producer of sugar, exporting more of it than any colony, exporting more of it than Jamaica, Cuba, and Brazil combined. And it produced half of the world's coffee, beside being roughly the size of Massachusetts. France's profit, right, would come at a grave human cost. An estimation of 25,000 to 40,000 enslaved people died each year due simply to punishment, work conditions, disease, and suicide. Close to 3 million enslaved people were brought in total to grow, harvest, and Saint-Domingue's many crops. In short, one cannot overstate the inhuman cruelty of enslavement in Haiti, which would then spread throughout the Americas. So this is another important thing, of course, is that during the Age of Revolution, Haiti, alongside, and this is important, alongside France and the United States, would be free itself, right, of imperial rule in the Haitian Revolution. Although it happened around the same time as the French Republic and the United States, this would be forgotten in history, but it would be the only place where a revolution was initiated by enslaved peoples. And oftentimes we talk about the Constitution of the United States being so revolutionary, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we fail to actually look at Haiti's constitution in 1805, where it said that, in fact, all human beings on this island, regardless of race, which also meant people who were there as refugees, Polish women and others from the Ottoman Empire, were all defined by the Constitution as Black. And that was, as Michel Triot calls, that was it. It destroyed this ontological order, not only was this country calling itself Black in a document, but that everyone was Black, regardless of shade. And everyone was citizen. Another rule was, at this point, no foreigner, right, would ever or could ever own property in Haiti. And so the scholar goes by Franklin Knight talks about the revolutionary implications of the Haitian Revolution and what it meant for this understanding of human rights, where Black was not only human, but Black was also free. And it was in this document that they would adopt the name Haiti for the act, recognizing a long solidarity with indigenous peoples, or the first Haitian. Of course, this would come at a great cost for Haiti, which would be denied not only diplomatic recognition and face embargoes, but would have to pay France an indemnity that would take how many years?
1832 until,
In 1950.
They say about 80, right? 80 years.
yes, that sounds about 80. Yeah.
About 80 years. They had to pay France for lost property. Literally, pay France for them as lost property. And when we think about this amount, I had it written here. This becomes really important. So in my book, I talk about the ways in which this would make it extremely difficult, right, for Haiti's efforts to rebuild itself after the revolution. And the sum, like I said, it was meant to compensate French colonists for the lost revenue, and it was in 1825. What I didn't say is that Haiti's revolution was fought against Napoleon. What I didn't say is because France lost all of these resources and Napoleon was fighting enslaved folks, also folks who had freed themselves, that he would sell the Louisiana Purchase to the United States at a cost that would expand the United States greatly. That's what I didn't say. That it was these enslaved people who would defeat Napoleon. And of course, what would happen is that in 1825, when Haiti sought recognition, still seeking recognition from the growing empires, France and the United States, there was a sense, this kind of like ransoming that happened. So French King Charles X said he would recognize Haiti. And then there were ships at the shore. Essentially what Marlene Doe calls the greatest heist in history. So they would be charged roughly 150 million francs in 1825. That is about $3 billion current currency, around 10 times the amount the US paid for the Louisiana territory. Then the French banks would say they had to borrow from the French banks themselves and pay the money in francs and not Haitian money. Coffers filled with money would go in and be counted, and this happened for a long time. But then they had to borrow from the French banks, who added interest, and this would continue. I write though that US empire, French empire would be replaced by a different empire by the early 1900s, and that's the United States. The United States had investments in Haiti, right? They wanted to build plantation style kind of spaces there, as they were doing elsewhere in the Caribbean. And at the behest of what is now Citibank, they would occupy Haiti and send Marines there who would stay for 20 years. One of the photos is a very important moment where the Marines would crucify a Cowcow rebellion leader and pose him like Jesus, the crucifixion of Charlemagne. And this circulated. This circulated at a particular time when we have to think about what's going on in the United States. What does it mean to circulate a dead Black body to instill fear in others who the US occupation would last from, some would argue that it's still continuing, so maybe we can go there, but the US occupation will last from 1915 until 1934. I remember my grandfather saying, he remembers, right, seeing the Marines, he remembers that. And a lot of things would happen, including this kind of food for work program. So folks working on the roads for free, not for free, but forcibly. The US would create a military school, school of agriculture. And this would begin to be the kind of US imperialism in Haiti. There's a lot I won't go into that we can kind of talk about, but I want to kind of bring us to the present. If we look at the news and we kind of think about what's going on in Haiti today, Jovenel Moïse was assassinated at his home. I remember that day very well. And I remember someone and people being like, oh, isn't that sad that Haiti just had another assassination? Said this is the first assassination in 102 years. Jovenel Moïse was assassinated by an alleged 20 armed Colombian mercenaries who were hired by international actors and other conspirators to be uncovered. He was assassinated in his home, but that's not the story of today. The story of today is the earthquake and this history. So the earthquake at the helm of the reconstruction efforts was none other than Bill Clinton. That is important. And research has shown that millions and millions donated to Haiti went back to the coffers of the US and other donors. That's just how it worked. So if you were a UN worker and you were in Haiti, you were paid a lot of money for being there because it was dangerous. A lot of the money went back to the same people there to help. But this wasn't the first time, right? And this would be on the backs of an ongoing occupation by MUNISTA, who was brought into the country to restore order after the coup that disposed of Africana Studies the first time and the second time. Haitian historians will tell you, and I met one of the coup leaders who, long story short, he's now in the United States, he's been extradited. And he clearly says, right, he led the coup in 2004, we were given arms by the US. We were trained by them. This is Guy Philippe who led the coup, unabashed. This is what happens. This is what empire looks like. So MUNISTA, the UN stabilizing forces then would be deployed in Haiti, and its formation, the way it is now, in 2004. And they would stay for over a decade, till 2017. This is when kidnappings as a mode of extortion rise. And so that's important. What is also important is that the person who preceded Jovenel Moïse, who was assassinated, President Martelly, did not win the election by popular vote, which is how elections are won. It was none other than Hillary Clinton who decided that he won. And he is what we call a neo-Duvalierist, the occupation, the dictatorship, the near 30-year dictatorship that was supported unabashedly by the CIA. And all of this is public record, right? Because this would help in the fight against communism across the Caribbean and Latin America. So Martelly was elected, and he would put in place, as others had done before him, these kind of vigilante gangs. And when Matali didn't step down, or, his successor was the same person that was part of the same party. Same situation, not elected. It was the United States and the core group, or the Friends of Haiti, who decided that this would be the president. And he would continue the same entrenchment, the same gangs as his predecessor. So when they talk about gangs have taken over Haiti, we ask ourselves a number of things. How does empire continue? How do we think about the prevalence of the coalition between elites here and there, the transference of arms? And I guess I'll end by saying, then what is actually coloniality? What is empire? What are we even saying? What does it mean? And one of the ways in which I've come to think of empire in my own work are the mechanisms and the tools, right, to further colonial rule. And this is not simply political and economic, it's also epistemic and discursive. So the way that Haiti is represented, right, as a space of chaos and turmoil of its own making is part of the discursive unlogics of empire. I did not give justice to this history or to this present. And I'm sure I left a lot of things out, but I hope maybe we can kind of pick up and talk.
Thank you. We move on to the next question. Martin Luther King Jr. famously argued that the United States is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, given its widespread militaristic aggression. How does the case of Haiti exemplify King's insight? And why is it important to engage in questions of imperialism when talking about Haiti? Mr. Eddins.
So I'll be taking that question. Hi, everyone.
Can you repeat the question? And it's really hard to hear back here.
Sure, I'm going to argue.
And can you introduce yourself when you speak, so we know?
Okay. So Martin Luther King Jr. famously argued that the United States is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, given its widespread militaristic aggression. How does the case of Haiti exemplify King's insight? And why is it important to engage questions of imperialism when talking about Haiti?
Okay, so I'll take that question. Hi, everyone. I'm Crystal Eddins. I'm an associate professor of sociology and affiliate faculty with the Africana Studies department here at Pitt. I've been doing research and thinking about the Haitian Revolution, racial capitalism and colonialism, and collective resistance for some time, and my book, Rituals, Runaways, and the Haitian Revolution, centered on Marronage, looking at some of the histories around the legacies, the long legacies of those first Africans who were brought to IT and escaped, and how those patterns of escape would kind of continue to shape a sense of collective consciousness that led to the Haitian Revolution. So briefly, to just kind of wrap that up, or in terms of situating myself. So I'm a Black American, and kind of consider myself to be an outsider when it comes to the study of Haitian history, Haitian studies. But my research and travel and teaching and political commitments have led me to try to find ways to express solidarity with Haitians, not just in terms of their history and the importance of their history, but in terms of the events of today. And so I bring this up because scholars like Leslie Alexander and Brandon Bird have shown that there's a very long history and tradition of Black American activists and scholars and political figures, people like Frederick Douglass and W.E.B. Du Bois, James Weldon Johnson, who have uplifted Haiti's importance to global history, and Haiti's importance to challenging and disrupting slavery and the transatlantic slave trade, white supremacy and colonial racial capitalism. And so I feel that, and I think we all feel that in this moment, that same type of solidarity is needed as much as ever, particularly at a time when U.S. imperialism and war waging threatens the lives, the safety and security of millions of people around the world, including in Gaza, which we kind of briefly mentioned earlier, and especially in Haiti. So when we were, thinking of, putting together this panel, this roundtable, we were initially kind of thinking about trying to schedule the event to coincide with the anniversary of the April 4th, 1969 assassination of Martin Luther King Jr., to bring attention to the issue of imperialism as it relates to Haiti. So many of you might be aware that, toward the latter years of his life, King became increasingly aware of the fight for racial justice in the United States was incomplete without first also addressing the poverty that is concentrated in Black communities, and the poverty that is also underwritten by America's commitments, not necessarily to improving the quality of life for its citizens, but to accumulating profits abroad through militaristic ventures. And so, like you mentioned in your opening comments, Dr. Dubuisson, in terms of, thinking about the ways that we're all co-implicated in empire. And the fact of the matter is that the use of violence and, expropriation and exploitation that happens abroad is co-constituted. It's happening at the same time and oftentimes with the same mechanisms of what is happening here in the United States. We can also think of that the image that you showed of Charlemagne Parot as a lynching, right? Kind of coinciding with the same types of lynchings that were happening here in the United States at that time period. So also, if others are interested in kind of further exploring this relationship between the U.S. expropriation of resources and use of violence in Black communities, domestically and abroad, I would also highly suggest Sharice Burton-Stelly's recent book, Black Scare, Red Scare, that kind of talks about Wall Street imperialism in Haiti and how that reproduced what she calls this structural location of Blackness, right? This widespread exploitation, super exploitation, and racial oppression. So when we think about Martin King's sentiments, his comments and his thoughts also have to be situated, of course, within the context of his critiques of the US's escalating war in Vietnam. But I would argue that the history of US imperialism in Haiti and elsewhere are part and parcel of his analysis. So as we saw, this was most clearly seen with the 1915 to 1934 military occupation of Haiti, in which thousands of Haitians were killed, and the country was robbed of its sovereignty as well as many material resources. And as this paternalistic relationship in which the United States and other Western powers directly and indirectly exert control over Haiti's politics and economy remains an impediment to Haiti's self-determination well into today, leading up to and including the assassination of Moise. So back in 2018, was the last time that I had the opportunity to travel to Haiti for research purposes. And shortly after I returned to the United States, a wave of protests in the country began. That would be named the Petro-Caribe movement. And this movement was triggered essentially because in July 2018, the International Monetary Fund mandated that the Haitian government increase its gas prices, which put a strain on poor and working class Haitians' cost of living and transportation, and gave rise to this movement that challenged not only the corruption of the Moise administration, but also the role of the United States in attempting to sabotage development aid from Venezuela and for suppressing wages. And then the following year, in February 2019, a group of several men were arrested by Port-au-Prince police outside of the Haitian Central Bank. In their possession were multiple sets of license plates, automatic rifles, pistols, drones, satellite phones, and 5 US passports. So these were 5 white American men who get arrested outside of a bank with all of this artillery, weaponry, and passports and money. And they were later identified as members of the military-industrial complex. 2 were Navy SEALs, 2 had served in the US military, and the 5th had served as a Blackwater trained contractor with the Department of Homeland Security. So this sounds like something like out of a Ben Affleck movie or something like that, right? But this is, and it sounds conspiratorial, but this is, was reported by the AP. So these are actual incidences where we can see the direct control and the direct ways that the United States overtly, and in this case, maybe attempts to covertly enact operations in Haiti that go against the country's best will. So later it was reported that these men were a part of a botched plan to move funds on behalf of a high-ranking government official who was representing Moise. But the State Department, quickly secured these men's release, and they were on a flight to Miami only hours after being detained. So since the assassination of President Moise, which also, as you mentioned, seems to have been perpetrated by outsiders, Haiti has obviously spiraled into a state of disarray that the United States, the United Nations, and other political actors like CARICOM have used to further justify a military intervention. So you've probably seen reporting around the possibility of Kenyan forces entering into Haiti. And many would argue that this is just bound to kind of further reproduce violence, dispossession, and disempowerment of the Haitian people. So with these realities in mind, I think it's important for us to kind of recall the instructions from King and from other anti-imperialists to think deeply about what it means to be in solidarity with those subjugated by global empire, such as in Haiti and Gaza, and to take possible steps to subvert unjust systems of power from within our position in the midst of the belly of the beast, so to speak.
I have a slight follow-up question. Oh, sure. Okay, so last question, Professor Germain. Can you talk about how the Black world has expressed sentiments of solidarity to Haiti?
Yeah. So Felix Germain, Chair of Africana Studies, and the question is about solidarity in the Black world. I thought, really, I started to think about this last night, but it's something that's been on my mind for a while. And I think solidarity in the Black world has 2 speeds. On the one hand, you have the intellectual speed, the intellectual level, right? So you mentioned African American thinkers and activists and historical figures, looking at Haiti as a symbol of freedom, to really uplift themselves too, to justify their own freedom too here. But beyond that, you also had intellectuals such as, the Anna Julia Cooper, the African-American woman, first African-American woman to receive a PhD in French, Sorbonne, wrote a dissertation on the Haitian Revolution. You can go on, C.L.R. James, Trinidadian scholar, and the Black Jacobins. This is a book about the Haitian Revolution, which is sort of like a different take, right, on the Haitian Revolution. Not describing it as a mere revolt, a slave revolt, but as a revolution, right? And the Caribbean, you can think of Aimé Césaire, also wrote Monsieur Toussaint. You can think of Maurice Condé, the Guadeloupean writer, author who recently passed away. One of the Maurice Condé would be what's the African American woman? Nobel Prize.
Tony
Toni Morrison of the Francophone world, really, passed away, I think, on April 1st. But she, sensitized people and around issues of anti-Haitianism or, Haitian experiences. I'm thinking about also the Trinidadian Calypso, King Calypso, David Brother, with songs such as Haiti, I'm Sorry. Really, expressing what you all just said in the song. I'm thinking of also Pan-African sentiments and of the 1960s coming from the African continent. When the Duvalier father became, took power, creating a diaspora of primarily Haitian, privileged Haitian. But these people had, they had to find a place to go. And many African, especially Francophone African countries, gave them position, right? Gave them a place to go to. So you had this history of like Pan-Africanism and this history of looking at Haiti as a symbol of pride, right? Throughout Africa and the African diaspora. That's always, that has been there. But I'm talking also, I wanted us to think also about the concept of solidarity, not only solidarity in the Black world, but solidarity to Haiti. As I kept on thinking about this, the concept of solidarity on three wheels came to my mind, right? Three wheels, it's not working that well. In a sense that we have solidarity in Guadeloupe and Martinique. By the way, I'm from Martinique, and so I'm thinking about this from my own experience in the Caribbean, right, and Martinique. My first experience with Haitians was when I was really 4 or 5 years old. I was really a little child, and there was someone from Haiti in my neighborhood. Wasn't a neighbor. I'm from the kind of country. Who was working there, right? And I actually liked this guy. I followed him all over, I followed him all the way around. I followed him all over the place. And I got to know him. We developed a connection. And I got to know that, he had children my own age, right? But he was living in Martinique, right? So it made me think, so why are you there? What about your own kids? I have my father, my mother, so. And I think, to me, that was the beginning of solidarity. So developing a connection. I was better able to understand the struggle that this man, was under, he was going through, living so far away from his family, right? So the first thing is connection. But the other thing, this concept of solidarity on three wheels. Sometimes when Jeannot was his name, would go in a neighborhood, some people would look down. They would not look up to Jeannot. They would not treat Jeannot the way he should be treated. I saw Jeannot as a family member. I saw Jeannot as like, really someone I looked up to. But in a neighborhood, that wasn't always the case. Why? The question is why? Why? I think because Jeannot represented a and part of their something about their own identity which they were not comfortable with. He represented an African part of their identity which impressed upon people of the neighborhood some discomfort. Jeannot spoke French, but Jeannot spoke Creole better than French. And that also, because of the colonial background of the island, that also created some sort of tension. And And then as I realized that this was a common pattern. This is a common pattern, throughout the Caribbean. And sometimes it is made even worse when you have a demagogue. When you have demagogues who use migration. We're very used to this phenomenon in the US. It's a la mode these days. But when you have a demagogue using migration, the anti-migrant sentiment increases. And so that's why I think about this concept of solidarity on three wheels, because on the one hand, yes, we, the intellectuals we praise, but how does that translate on the ground? What is the experience of Haitian people and as they move around through the Caribbean and North America? So that's, and then we must ask, so what do governments do, right, to worsen or to improve these situations? Kept on thinking about so I'm thinking about us in the United States. What can we do, right? Are we doing enough? Thinking about the Dominican Republic. When you look at the number of Haitians in the Dominican Republic, which is a country with a history of anti-Haitianism, right? But when you look at the number of Haitians in the Dominican Republic, it's about 1 million, plus Haitian and beyond. And I'm thinking, what if, proportionally speaking, we had the same number of Haitians in the US? In other words, 10% of the population, right? That would be 35%, 35 million, right? So what if we had 35 million Haitians in the US? I want you to think about that. Would we be happier? Would Americans welcome these Haitians? Would racialized Americans, even African Americans, would they see them as an ally or a threat? Right? How would solidarity work? Also. So, I mean, we can ask so many questions, right? But I think one thing is clear when it comes to solidarity. We're not doing enough. We can sit down and intellectualize this phenomenon. Yeah, sure. But one thing is clear, we're not doing enough. We're not doing enough. When we had recently, a few years back, George Floyd, right, being murdered, we had an earthquake where 200,000 people died. People are drowning coming here. Children are drowning coming here. This is George Floyd's times 300,000. So are we doing enough? Where is the solidarity? I think here we need to question of, we need to interrogate power. Those who have the power to do something, should be able to do something. But why don't we do more? Maybe because the Haitians don't have power. They can't, maybe it's a question of power. I mean, these are questions for you, for the audience. But I didn't want to talk about solidarity in terms of, painting a romantic idea of like this Black world, that we are helping Haitians, and it's not true. there are different speeds here. There is this intellectual speed. Yeah, sure, yes. It makes us feel good. First Black Republic, we are proud. Black people, we rose. Oh, yeah, we can do it. If somebody, I look at my Brazilian sister here, is a black person in Brazil does something amazing, it impacts me too. So I feel great. Sure. But in practice, how do we implement that? Right? That is, I think, the big question. So let's not, I don't want to paint a romantic, rosy picture of solidarity. And I think that's my 2 cents here.
So we're going to open up for questions and have a more casual thing, and if folks want me to speak, but for questions, louder. Can you say that louder? Questions. If there are questions, and I'm sorry, Manuel did introduce all of us, so I didn't feel like I had to introduce myself again, but Darlène Dubuisson, Anthropology. And yeah, I've been thinking with these colleagues for a while, right? And I think, thank you so much for this conversation.
So I have a couple, but the one, is there a way that we could get to see that constitution that says that everybody in Haiti is Black? I love that.
Yes, I can share.
The whole universe, you're an anthropologist, so all mankind was Black in the first place, right? So I don't know if they knew that. But I would love to see that. So my second point is, your question was solidarity? Right, and your question was what to do, right? So I think about that picture that that you said that, tell me your name again?
Oh, my name? Darlène.
Darla.
Yeah.
That Darla showed of the enslaved African with the chains and the rope and so forth, and said that it was going around as propaganda after the Haitian Revolution in the United States. And what was the purpose of that, right? And what is the purpose of showing Haitians in chaos, in poverty, not able to take care of themselves? So, and what to do is that what we're doing right now with the information and to counter those kinds of images, really, and especially splashing that that constitution that says that. You see what I mean?
I can say something about solidarity and what we can do. An example is because of the recent events. So Haitians, there's a huge Haitian diaspora. They go, and when they go legally or illegally. Some people, when they go legally, visa expires, right? And that means they have to return home. Are you going to send them home now in this current situation? Right? What do you do? Right? So one of the things that you can do is pressure governments to extend visas and provide these people asylum.
Can I add something there? Haiti does have a large diaspora, not as large as Dominican Republic, but second to Dominican Republic. And Haitians in the 1980s, when we were coming up, there was fights. It was not okay to be Haitian growing up. Haitians in the 1980s, with the HIV/AIDS epidemic, they were read as carriers. We were not allowed to give blood until the 1990s. I know what it's like to live in Boston, Haitian. It's different. It's a different sort of experience, right? So to Felix's point, like on the ground, if we want to ask that question, we can answer it. And the other thing about the George Floyd moment, like you're speaking about, like I think about solidarity as performance and what does it mean to actually have skin in the game? By the way, 45 minutes from here, over 1,000 Haitian migrants. Some of the folks I worked with in Mexico are in Pittsburgh, not far. A number of them have been trafficked. My uncle worked there. And the way it went is that my uncle somehow is in the US. My mother said, oh, actually, he was in Pittsburgh. I'm like, there's no way he was in Pittsburgh. There are no Haitians in Pittsburgh, the judge, right? And he's like, no, he's in Pittsburgh. And he moved to Florida because it was too cold. And I thought, winter, no. There is a meatpacking factory in Crystal who has hired hundreds and hundreds of Haitians who are undocumented, some, and a number of the Biden program, and they work in the freezer. So that's why the complaint of being pulled. So I went to Chris Roy. And this Chris Roy, the stores look like some version of Flatbush, where I moved here from. And this is 45 minutes away. They're hired in the meatpacking factory and also the chocolate factory. Their children here next to Pittsburgh, one of the women said, our children don't go to school. They said there's not enough room for the kids in school. When I asked them, well, what can I do? What do you need me to do? She goes, can you count how many we are? Because if you count how many we are, then maybe somebody in Pittsburgh will do something. That's down the street, right? And I think we need to think about how close Empire is to us. And I want to say that Chris Roy, where they are, there is a really strong anti-immigrant, anti-Black sentiment such that white nationalists came to their flag party, right? When they were waving the Haitian flag and rev their engines, right, to drown out the noise of these immigrants, 45 minutes from here. So I want us to also think about what's happening locally.
I think how much of this solidarity starts with education, do you think? I'm currently reading Fear of the Black Republic, and I'm learning so much about how deep the solidarity actually runs between Black activists in the United States and Haitians. Around 20 years after, in the 2 decades after Haiti got their independence in 1804, there's so many stories and so much just material that we have referencing how activists were putting Haiti on this pedestal and looking to Haiti as the first Black Republic and having so much pride in that just as Black people. And I think that so much of that history is lost, and that affects our experiences in the United States. Like you said, the experience of being Black, growing up Black in the 80s and the 90s. I think so much of that is a lack of education. And so I want to know, how do you think that we lost that history and lost that pride, and how do we get back in control of our narrative?
Want to take another, because we have to wrap up on it. There's a couple more hands and we can all answer them together.
Hello everyone, and it's amazing to hear you all. My name is Luana, and I was thinking about, you've been discussing about solidarity a lot in this conversation, but I would like to connect solidarity with the practice of mahunage, and to think about, especially with the case of Haiti, but also in Brazil with the Quilombo communities, and thinking about how even today we have this strong idea and practice of Quilombos in Brazil, and how we can think about solidarity in connection with mahunage, to think about how we can think about getting not just together, but with intentionality to do something, make something, and change something. And I'm thinking, especially in the case that we are here in academia, it's a university setting, and we're thinking about the discussion and the conversations that a lot of times do not get beyond the walls of academia. And I was thinking, with connection with the arts too, how can we connect the practice of mahunage with the arts? Because, for example, in Brazil, a lot of people know about Haiti and experiencing Haiti through music. There is like a very famous song by Caetano Veloso and Gilberto Gil, say, Haiti é aqui, and Haiti is here. And a lot of people sing that song and want to know more about Haiti because of that song, because of the arts, or because of poetry, or because of any kind of artistic expression. So I was thinking about how can we connect this idea of solidarity, mahunage, in the arts, and going beyond what's happening in the discussions that we have in academia.
There may be 2 more hands, and then we'll wrap up all these questions together.
Thank you for this conversation. I have a question about today, since the resignation of Henry, what's what we've been seeing has been really based on gangs taking over Haiti, and I am familiar with that from Palestine. I'm familiar that Syria killability comes a lot with crisis, as you said, in people's own making, and terrorists, cartels, or gangs, depending on what race you belong to. So can Asian people defend themselves, and what are we seeing today? Is it close to that, or what do you see?
One more question? Was there one more? I'll take up the gang question. It is a long practice for dictators to use gangs, and we need to be clear what these gangs are and who these gangs are. A lot of them are dispossessed youth in various areas. We can think, and in this particular case, but there are also paramilitary in the case of Duvalier. There are also the Chimère in the case of Aristide. And what I think becomes important about this kind of naming practice, what does it mean to name them gangs? What is interesting about this gang and what is difficult about this gang? And, you know, my family lives in the territory of this gang. And then Madisne, they're there now, right? And they're okay. But what's difficult about these gangs is that one of the gang leaders, Barbara Q, was a police officer. What is difficult and what I kind of talk about is that the special armed forces of the police in Haiti were trained by UNISTA, who were Brazilian forces. What is difficult is that Brazilian forces and Chile, both of them would train these police in US tactics. It isn't by no accident then that a number of the undocumented did not come to the US. They went to Brazil and Chile. And then with the elections of Piñera and Bolsonaro, they were kicked out, some effectively put onto planes and sent back. So I want to think with that, like what you're saying, right? These creations or this idea, and there's a lot of research around this, that kidnapping and extortion, there is ideas that it was learned through collaborations of the Brazilian soldiers in Cité Soleil, that it would escalate at this particular moment to this kind of state crafting, the ways in which empire turns those that are in the empire against each other, right? And so that's what I think about solidarity. What are the impediments to solidarity and how do we deal with it at home? Is like, how do we think about and we deal with race at home, right? And how this kind of, like you said, this part of themselves that they were uncomfortable with, how empire kind of turns us against each other because there is a reflection of ourselves in the other that kind of gets, like, so for instance, Chile was seeing itself as, you know, part of the Western world. There was this idea that we're going to help Haiti, Brazil, the same, we're helping Haiti, right? And this kind of puts them in this idea of the developer and the way that gets turned on its head with the change. We talked about demagogues in both situations where it gets turned on its head, right? And last thing with Venezuela, the CARICOM was because Venezuela gave Haiti subsidies on gas and said they wouldn't have to pay for 25 years. Trump did not like that. Trump got, and this is, again, it sounds conspiratorial, but this is all tracked, Moïse to vote against Venezuela because Venezuela was not following orders. So these are the things I think that become really important to think.
And to follow up on that, I think I'm going to come back to your question about how do we recover these perspectives of global solidarity. I think part of the importance of what we're talking about here also is just integrating not only a racial analysis, but a class analysis, an analysis of global capitalism and the ways that, as you mentioned, different groups have vested interest in maintaining empire. Recently there was a press conference that was organized by Al Sharpton's organization, where he and some other Black American leaders, as well as some Haitian American, I think religious figures, were essentially kind of calling on the government to do more. And so I think you're completely right, Felix, in terms of putting pressure on government to keep their hands off Haiti, so to speak, right? And to reduce these kinds of imperial ventures. Because even though that's not necessarily what Al Sharpton and his delegation were advocating for, they were more so kind of supporting the idea of Kenyan troops coming into Haiti, as well as supporting ideas around stopping deportations. And so I do think it's important to allow that to advocate on that behalf. So for example, the wet foot, dry foot immigration policy under Obama had been repealed. And this was essentially the policy that allowed Cubans to come into the United States if they could, and to claim access to citizenship. But Haitians were excluded from that process for years until, I can't remember what year it was, but under the Obama administration, that was repealed. So that's maybe like one example of what a more so-called equitable migration policy looks like. But to kind of champion my colleague Darlène Dubuisson, her upcoming book, looking at Haiti's futures, really advocates the fact that we, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we can't necessarily only look to immigration and asylum as the only solution, right? Haitians have the right to inhabit their homes without militaristic intervention, without violence, and without external intervention into their daily affairs. And so I think part of what is really important about what you're doing is to bring attention to that reality, which also calls on us to again point out systems of power that prevent people from being able to think of Haiti as having a future, right?
Yeah, Reclaiming Haiti's Futures, you can pre-order, I guess. I don't do the whole thing. So we're gonna end, but I wanna end by responding to your question. This is a series, and the series is going more and more out into the public. We just started here, right? But we are working with the Latin American Center, and there is a Haiti exhibition, and our colleagues and the Center for Latin American Studies, and that's going to be on for, I want to say, like 6 months, is it?
There's this one, yeah, also.
Yeah, and
Gallery.
at the that at the gallery, yes. So the gallery will open, and we are working with folks at Urban Ed, and we are doing education series for Pittsburgh school children, right, around this. And this is some of the stuff we're thinking. So we start here within this space, but we're moving out further and further out with really talking about empire and its implication, culminating in a series of competitions in our info. So look out for that. Thank you.
Thank you.